Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for people to arrive. Zoom takes a while to let people in, so we'll be starting in just a moment. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people to arrive. Zoom's very slow letting people in, so we will be starting in around about 30 seconds, and then we can just wait for people to arrive as they come in. But I think we're going to go ahead and go now. As I say, people will still keep arriving for a few minutes. So good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to the launch of our brand new report, A Year in the World of Resilience 2023. This is a brand new report that we've done, and it's a new idea that we had earlier on in the year. We produce an awful lot of research during the year, and we thought that it would be good to try and tie all that research together in one report, just pulling the main themes out that we've learnt across the year and those which are important to our members as well. In addition to that, we also carried out a survey, quite a light touch, short survey this time, because we're really using a lot of the contact we've had already, and also having a lot of conversation. So we've got a lot of insight from this report, from conversations that we've had during the project. So my name is Rachel Elliott. I'm Head of Thought Leadership at the BCI, and it's the responsibility of myself and my team for putting this portfolio of reports together. As I say, this one's been a really interesting one. We've made this a bit more colourful, a bit more sort of year-end annual kind of feel. So it's a colourful report, and I hope you take your time to read that. You can download that now from the BCI website. If you go to download it, you'll also see there's regional outputs as well. Now, those regional, excuse me, those regional outputs are there for members. So we've got one for Australia and New Zealand, and we've also got one for Asia as well. So you can look at the particular statistics for your own region and marry those up with the global ones, because there are some discrepancies, some interesting discrepancies between the different regions. You'll see in your tab, you've got a Q&A tab and a chat tab. I'd really encourage you to use those as we're going along. Please do put any questions you have into that Q&A tab, and we'll get to those either afterwards, or if it's a particularly pertinent question, has to relate to a particular slide, we might try and fit it in during the webinar. And also, please do keep your chat flowing as well. If you've got any points that you'd like to make, please do so in that chat. I do apologise. I do say this at the start of our launches, so we're very, very grateful to have Risk Connect sponsoring this report. They've been a tremendous partner over the course of this year in terms of our research. The research that we do produce is totally impartial, so Risk Connect have absolutely no say in the content of the report. This is all what we found from our own research, from our own interviews, and we've written it up ourselves. But we could not produce the research that we do if it wasn't for the sponsorship of people like Risk Connect. So big thank you to Risk Connect for their sponsorship. And we're very lucky today to have Brian Zuada himself on this webinar. Brian's Vice President and General Manager of Resilience at Risk Connect. Brian, I think you've got a few words you'd like to say, if you wouldn't mind just switching your camera on. Thank you and welcome.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it. And hello, everybody. And just to give a little bit of an introduction to Risk Connect. Risk Connect is an integrated risk management firm, and we help our clients through our software and our services really anticipate, manage, respond to a wide range of strategic and operational risks through, again, both services and software globally. So I came to Risk Connect through an acquisition of Castellon, where I was a part of, and that was in July of 2022. And so we actually completed the portfolio for Risk Connect as it relates to integrated risk management by adding a business continuity and operational resilience element, again, to their software and services portfolio. So really excited to join the company about a year and a half ago now. Just by way of background on myself, I've been in the business continuity and operational resilience space for about a little over 25 years now. I've done this through both consulting as well as an in-house practitioner, and have gotten a chance to work with and be part of a wide range of different companies. I started my career out in the U.S. military, where I was doing contingency planning, and then kind of like a lot of people fell into this by accident. But it's been an absolute pleasure to be part of the BCI for a number of years now, and I really always look forward to partnering with Rachel and team on this type of research and many other different initiatives globally. So again, thanks, Rachel, for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's great to have you here, and I know you'll be sharing a lot during this webinar, so thank you. So just to dive into the findings of the report. So you can see Brian and myself there. We've also got Terry here today as well. Terry, do you mind switching your camera on, just giving a bit of background about yourself?
Hi, thanks, Rachel, and hello, everyone. My name is Terry Probert. I'm a Business Continuity Manager for Teachers Mutual Bank Limited in Australia. We're a small mutual bank that focuses on teachers and essential workers. We provide those services to our essential workers, those who do good, banking for good, for those who do good.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we'll just start to delve into the findings now. So as I say, it's a light touch survey this time, just to get a few insights. We had 158 respondents to that, 39 different countries. We had, from this region, we did have 18% from Australasia. So that's Oceania, Australia and New Zealand. We also had another 10% from Asia. So we had a really good response from those regions this year. And that was also echoed in the interviews that we did as well. 18 different sectors took part. The leading sectors for this particular report were financial services, professional services, public administration, health and social care, IT and education. As I said, we did interviews for this report. We carried out 10 face-to-face in-depth interviews with a number of those respondents. Really good insights. Thank you to everyone who took part in those. We had 17.5% of respondents were from companies under 250 employees, and the bulk of the respondents were from larger organisations. In terms of job roles, job functions, the top ones for this particular report were business continuity, risk management, operational resilience, consulting, and crisis management. So just a reminder for anyone who's recently joined, you've got a chat and a Q&A tab. I can see a few talkative people in the participant list, so please do keep your comments and your questions coming in. So the first section, we're sort of taking a look at the year gone by and where has the sort of strategic leadership of resilience in organisations really been focused. And of course, this is from a practitioner perspective. It's where they're seeing management really sort of concentrate their efforts. So you can see here, cyber resilience is at the top. Once we start to go through into the findings of the report, you'll see exactly why. big focus this year, big consequences for organizations if things do go wrong. Attackers are getting more sophisticated with the way they attack. They're using social engineering techniques a lot more. We'll go into that a lot later. Operational resilience. Already had discussions with Terry about CPS 230, the Financial Services New Standard, and complying to that. But it's not just Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Asia. Operational resilience regulation is coming in throughout the world. And you'll see on a slide we got focused on this area, it's very definitely not just financial services, operational resilience. Over 3/4 of our members say that they have some kind of operational resilience program in place. Also, some of that regulation from financial services is now starting to have a ripple effect amongst third parties who deal with financial services organizations. Crisis management, business continuity, a fair way down, but again, I'm not surprised. Still business continuity is often not seen as that strategic asset that many of us find that it is. Supply chain resilience, very low there, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. AI, 14%, and pandemic planning, you can see there, that's right at the bottom of the slide. So a bit of a further delve into the detail around cyber. So again, that was right at the top of the list in the previous graph. Not really a surprise. I tried to find out some statistics, as I always do for these reports, to try and back up our own. Most recent report I could find was one that was out very recently by IBM. There's been a 15% increase over the past 3 years in terms of the number of cyber attacks. What I would say, even though there has been an increase this year, that sort of level we see steep rises, double-digit rise every year in this, but it's starting to plateau. And the reason for that is attackers are now creating much more personalized attacks. They're doing their best to really find out about those victims that they want to target, looking at senior managers, using AI and machine learning capabilities to really amplify social engineering capabilities and identify vulnerabilities for attackers as well. They're also getting much more believable, the types of emails that we see. I think all of us are aware of the traditional type of phishing email, for example, but they're becoming more and more believable now. And the importance of ensuring you do regular penetration testing, ensure staff are fully aware of how to recognize an attack, regular training and exercising. I know we at the BCI, we have to complete a cybersecurity training course every single month just to make sure we're right on the top of current developments. The world is also getting much more interconnected. So we see Internet of Things, so connected devices all talking to each other. We've now got very, very fast internet through our own mobile phones. 5G is now becoming more and more available throughout the world. The quantum as well, we've just got this sort of quantum universe with everything being connected. So if an attacker can get into any part of that, they can create a lot of damage. It's also worth mentioning AI as well from another perspective, not just social engineering, but anyone can now go and curate some kind of cyber attack by just going to a generative AI bot and asking it to create a cyber attack, which is very, very dangerous. You don't need to be that person who's sat there coding in the corner of a very dark room. These can be created by anyone, and that really opens up the opportunity for people to be able to create those attacks. So this is obviously a huge concern for senior management, and you can see there I've just stolen a graph which some of you may be familiar with from our Horizon Scan report this year. Cyber attacks is the top concern for next year, right in the top right corner there. High impact, higher likelihood. People are concerned about that. management are concerned as well. There's fines, loss of reputation, loss of customers, loss of business, and a reputational impact. We see small companies going out of business because they've been hit by a cyber attack. Brian.
Well, I think, again, I doubt many people are surprised that this is top of the list for senior management. I think when I talk to different members of the C-suite in large, medium, small organizations, number one, I think they recognize that so much of their business is technology enabled. Okay, well, that's obviously increasing, over and over again. But I think what they worry about is that their go-to-market strategies are oftentimes at risk with very little notice, much of it outside of their control. They do their best to prevent the onset or the realization of a cyber attack. But this is always something that can trip up their overall, the execution of their strategy. And the impact, as it says on that last bullet, it's strategic, but it's also very extended, very long-term impacts if improperly managed. And so I see over and over again that this is the number one driver for investment, whether it's initial investment or growth and investment in resilience, just to be able to hopefully prevent, but certainly prepare for this type of situation. Certainly number two probably would fall into a broad range of compliance, issues, but cyber is one that has just some incredible consequence if improperly managed. So I don't see this as a surprise at all, but like you said, we'll talk about it later on. The supply chain element ranking low is, but cyber ranking high, not too much of a surprise.
Yeah. Second on that list was operational resilience. As I said before, it's something which is very top of mind for financial services organizations, but I know people in other sectors, critical infrastructure companies, energy organizations, blue light services, for example. Operational resilience has been part of their knit for a very, very long time. And it's not really, again, it's a surprise that it's gone right up on the agenda. I think operational resilience as a thing, that we may not have seen that as high 5 years ago, but it's becoming, a very deep part of, management within organizations. I know Terry mentioned CPS 230 earlier. That's just one. We're seeing regulation sort of being brought into various other countries in the world. In the UK, we've had organizations that have already been fined for not complying to our new regulation. So it's a considerable concern for management at the moment. The BCI, we put an article out this week because there was a paper out by the Basel Committee this week that says banks are still not doing enough to ensure operational resilience. They even put it, to quote that paper themselves, they said that business continuity is not enough. Banks need to be doing a lot more in terms of operational resilience leadership. So I think that paper alone is probably not going to drive many people to take more consideration, but it does show that there are some cracks that need fixing. So this is going to be a topic at the top of mind for a very long time. And equally, we're seeing third parties too having to comply to operational resilience regulations. There's been various papers attached to existing regulations around third-party risk, and organizations who deal with financial services organizations are increasingly having to comply with that same regulation. And that's actually putting some companies, with the expense that that'll take, we've seen suppliers actually stop doing business with financial services organizations because it's too expensive for them to have to comply. They don't want to stop it, but they simply can't afford it. So, it is a big risk for small organizations as well. Terry.
Thanks, Rachel. So definitely with CPS 230 coming out, APRA has a focus on, our operational resilience and making sure that we move more from that reactive recovery to having that proactive resilience front of mind. That incorporates all aspects. So we need to make sure that we're looking at our operational risk management, our BAU risk profiles and our obligations and controls and testing, and making sure that they are all fit for purpose. So less focus, I guess, on responding and recovering, and more focus on how we can continue to operate with, the minimum arrangements that we need, and with that focus on what do we need to deliver to our members, and what do we need to make sure that our financial systems are fit for purpose and sustainable into the future. So I think that definitely that's going to drive a lot of the investment in Australia, making sure that we do meet those new regulations. But again, operational resilience is really the result of good operational risk management. So we need to bring all of those aspects of risk management together under that framework of resilience.
Thank you very much for that, Terry. It's good to have your thoughts from a regional perspective as well. So, resilience, as I put in the headline here, it needs to be embodied throughout the organisation, really not partitioned. So if I quickly shoot back to that slide, you can see there's all those different aspects, and there's more as well, which obviously aren't included. All these come together to make a resilient organisation. I've just picked a few here that I just wanted to highlight, though, in that chart. So new technology decisions, that's in 4th place in terms of senior manager priorities. But should it really be there? And I say that because it really shouldn't be management making decisions about the technology that they have to purchase. Management have a strategic vision for the organization, and it's their job to work with their IT leaders within their organization, even the users contributing to that via their IT staff. And it's a responsibility of those IT professionals to work closely with senior management and make those recommendations for purchases of technology that can help to align with an organization's strategic vision. If this doesn't happen, it can create serious problems with dynamics in organizations. And we see this a bit with crisis management as well. So that bottom-up approach that we talk about a lot now, where we can see, if people on the ground are left out of, not necessarily decision-making program, but if they're not involved in the response, they can become very isolated. And trust goes from teams if that happens. So we really need to ensure that everyone's involved in those technology decisions, really promotes information sharing, and it also avoids being in a culture of fear and mistrust. And that really does happen. I've seen that happen in organizations myself. Implementation of AI, second to the last of in the table. There's a lot of interest in AI, and we heard that when we were doing the research for this report. It's something we read about every day. Should it be higher? Maybe not at the moment. It's still, a fairly small issue. It's not really a sort of big strategic priority. And, I think you'll see as we go through the report just where we are with AI in terms of how mature that technology is and what people are doing to really embody that. Also take it on in terms of risk as well. Brian said earlier, supply chain resilience towards the bottom of the table. Should that be higher? I mean, I really think it should. 25%, that was a statistic for the number of people who said that was a strategic priority. A lot of organizations really struggled during COVID. They made changes to how their supply chains were operating. Very, very good changes most of the time, but we cannot be complacent. We could be facing another global incident. Doesn't necessarily have to be a pandemic, but how that will hit supply chains is likely to be very different from how COVID did. So we need to be continually aware, continually improving what we're doing with our supply chains and ensuring we're following best practice, really, drilling down into those tiers of a supply chain and ensuring that, we've got everything mapped out, map your supply chains, and ensure that, the risk is reduced to a minimum level. But I really think, again, all these aspects go into making a resilient organisation. And that's what we're really hearing throughout the report as well. Brian.
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned before, I was originally surprised by how supply chain and the resilience aspect had really ranked lower than it had in the past. And at first I was thinking, is it a fatigue item similar to pandemic? But I think also when I putting aside research for a moment, and I'm thinking about the organizations that I've engaged or I work with, I think in years past they used to be struggling between the financial benefits of a lean supply chain versus risk and resilience. And I think there is much more appetite to have less efficiency, more spend to result in a resilient outcome. And therefore I see it in that, number one, trying to unwind the complexity of their supply chains, having alternatives, not just alternatives in terms of suppliers, but alternatives in terms of inputs. And you hear about nearshoring versus offshoring, all these different topics. And I think we're starting to get to a point where organizations are baking in resilience into their supply chains, and therefore they're feeling a little bit more confident. But to your point, though, Rachel, I agree with you. Can't be complacent. We can't revert back to financial, benefits over resilience. There needs to be a healthy balance, and I think the world is. I think leaders are starting to wake up to that, continuing to bake in resilience, make some investments. So I think that's key. And I also agree with you, by the way. I think AI is going to go up in this list. I think many people look at the benefits, less the risks right now. But I think there'll be more and more time spent on good governance. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later on as we go.
Yeah, we will. And there are a lot of people who are worried about it as well. I think people can see the benefits, but there's a lot of reluctance as well because of the risks of that software. Chris Miller. Hi, Chris. Chris is our regular supply chain encyclopedia out of Australia. She said ships shortages are likely to be a concern into 2024, possibly 2025 and even 2026. It takes time to build merchant shipping and crew those vessels. There's a risk right there. We could be seeing shipping shortages. So bit of a concern. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Terry, I know you highlighted another problem in terms of, risks and the way people look at them.
Yeah, definitely. So interesting that the pandemic is now at the bottom of the list as well as AI. I guess there's some recency bias potentially around organisations feeling that they've managed COVID, so we know how to respond to a pandemic. We've got this, and I think that there's a real risk that we could fall into a trap of not being prepared for what the next type of pandemic might be, and it may not necessarily have the same impacts that we had this time. We could see greater extended loss of life, swamping of hospitals and emergency services, and what that then does is as that flow-on effect towards our our ability to continue to provide our services, it can also flow into supply chain as well. So I think the next transition, the next pandemic may actually be different. So we can't be complacent about that. And as far as AI, I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities in that. And I guess the risks around that are making sure that we do have those governance processes in place to manage how we utilize that technology.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, it's very, very important words. It's something we see in our Horizon Scan report every year. I remember the classic one was that our 2020 report came out in March 2020. So survey closed on 31st of December 2019. pandemic was right at the bottom of the list of concerns for 2020. You know, some people, I mean, we spoke to some of our members and they'd spotted it really, really early through really good horizon scanning techniques. But for a lot of organizations, you know, they'd ignored that risk, even though it really, really was present. It's those grey rhinos, as we call them, not black swans, it's those grey rhinos. So we need to be aware of those risks, which are there, but for some reason, we ignore them. It's easy to put them at the bottom of the pile. Now we're sort of looking ahead now. So this is what our members' priorities are, or people who've answered our survey, their priorities for the coming year. So again, not a surprise here. Improving cyber resilience, that was right at the top. And that's been echoed in our reports throughout the year. Again, I've just shot back here to our cyber resilience report from 2023. So you can see some scary stats I've fished out of that. 40% of organisations have seen financial losses of more than 10,000 euros as a result of cyber incidents. Again, if you're a small organisation, that's a lot of money. 72% have suffered a cyber incident as a result of phishing or spear phishing. I think that'll go up as these techniques are getting more and more believable, these entry points into organisations. 74% noticed an increase in cyber attacks. And there you go, 30%, nearly a third of organisations have suffered more than 5 cyber incidents in the past 12 months. That's a lot. And again, yes, you can have really, really good cyber defences, but the importance of training and exercising of your staff, that's the #1 entry point for attacks getting into organisations. You know, we really need to keep training our staff to ensure that they are right up to date with methods of attack, always a priority. Again, I looked at that Horizon Scan report earlier. It was in the top right box. Cyber attacks, most frequency, most impact to organisations. It was also a long-term priority as well. It was at the top of the list in terms of long-term priorities. We're seeing the reach of attacks becoming absolutely massive. You know, the recent MoveIt data breach, for example, that hit 60 million people worldwide and affected 1,000 organizations. That's a huge impact. So the cost of that to industry was absolutely massive. We're also seeing the way that attacks are being launched in organizations. That's changing. So I've already talked about the techniques that criminals are using in order to get into organizations. But, you know, there's other techniques that they're using. So in the past, we used to see attackers launch an attack as a sort of little seed in an IT system, and that frequently wasn't spotted. And that seed often lie dormant for many weeks, many months, or even years before it launched the attack. What we're seeing now, because our systems are getting better at detecting these, dwell times have dropped. So they've dropped from 10 to 8 days in the last year. That's quite a significant drop, and you know, we're seeing greater awareness of this kind of attack. You know, there's always a risk when a new software is released before patches have been released. If people don't you know, update a security patch, for example, we're seeing, you know, these 0-day attacks, attackers really exploiting the fact that some people haven't updated their means of defense. Different sectors as well are also being targeted in different ways. So the education sector, beginning of the school year, if you like, varies from country to country. Some school years start in January, some in September. And for the first 1 or 2 months of the school year, we see an increase in attacks, which for education organisations can be quite severe, difficult to manage. There's often a lack of budget in this area, so attackers are having quite a lot of success in that. And we're seeing an increase of investment. You you know, if our resilience professionals are going cap in hand to senior management saying we need more cybersecurity investment, as you can see from those management priorities, they're more likely to get it. Terry, oh, sorry, Brian's put his camera on first. Brian, have you got a point you'd like to make here?
Well, there is one. I'd love to hear people in the chat, comment on this. But, the second bullet up there, that move it attack as an example, what's really interesting to me is I hear about this type of a situation, not specifically this attack, but this type of a situation remains a huge concern because there's so many, just call it services, if you will, that an organization employs that, the end user might not even know about. It just might be something that like Move It, that's more of like a utility that you oftentimes don't think about or you don't see. You might even have a third party that you've engaged as an IT service provider that may use a utility like Move It. And so we oftentimes don't see it. And these are just lurking in the background and again, can come up to bite you if you don't really fully explore all of your dependencies. To me, it's this type of a situation because just the complexity and the detail is a lot like fourth party risk when it comes to supply chain. It's those details in the background that, it's just so complex, so hard to understand. I'm personally hopeful that we do a much better job of taking advantage of technologies like AI that's going to help us understand some of these dependencies that are, kind of really, in the weeds, so to speak, so that we can bring them, front and center to understand them and maybe pair that with threat and risk intelligence sources to really get better at preventing and responding. So that's a long way of saying that Move It like attack is something that I hear about constantly. Is I'm concerned, I don't have the answer. I hear about fourth party risk. I'm concerned I don't have the answer because of complexity. And hopefully there will be technology solutions that can sift through this immense amount of data that's out there to help us understand, where we might be vulnerable. So that one really resonates with me and many of the people that I talk to.
Thank you very much, Brian. I know, Terry, you had a point to make about this one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, and totally agree with Brian. The risks around fourth parties, I mean, they should, third and fourth parties, etc. They really should be considered an extension of our business, and we need to make sure that they are managing their risks as much as we are managing our risks, and that they have the appropriate controls in place to manage those cyber attacks, and that they're regularly doing all of the testing, all of the compliance activities that are required to meet those. But the expectations of the regulators are also increasing, and the expectations are that we will have in place all of the responses to mitigate and manage those potential attacks and threats. Obviously they will still occur, but then we need to make sure that we have the processes in place to manage through any sort of disruption on the back of that. So it's kind of like, make sure you have your controls up front, make sure that they're operating, and then look at, okay, if something did happen, what would we do to manage through that? And it's certainly that's a key focus of our board and an executive team. And so not just running scenario exercises with our crisis management team now, we're actually including the board in those conversations so that they're aware of, and it's very much front of mind of them as well. So, but yeah, we just all need to really remain on our toes, because the regulators are going to continue to push us to do better to protect our customers and businesses.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terry. Now back to supply chain. So this was very low on the management agenda, but I think practitioners know that it should be higher. And again, it was the second concern that we've highlighted for the next year for practitioners. Terry's already, sorry, not Terry, Chris has already highlighted again on that chat about the ships, but there's a lot of other risks that are perceived will get more attention in 2024. Geopolitical risk as well. That was one that a lot of our members highlighted when we were speaking to them. I just quote a Danish respondent, and they said, there are many risks involved when you have people and machines involved to support your clients in different countries around the globe. The geopolitical risk remains the #1 risk for our business. And we had a number of areas of the world causing particular disruption at the moment. So Ukraine, China, parts of Africa, and the situation in Israel and Gaza, they're all cited as areas leading to quite significant supply chain disruption. Elsewhere in the world as well, what we've seen this year, the Panama Canal, that's drying up, and that's severely reduced the number of ships that are able to pass through that canal this year, and the price of getting a ship through is going sky high because of that limitation as well. But you can see here, I think this is a really worrying little infographic that I pulled from our supply chain resilience report this year, looking at the percentage of organizations that seek to understand the business continuity arrangements of key suppliers. Really, really low here. Yet you can see in tier 1, that's only around 50% do for all or some of their suppliers really seek to get beyond that tick box exercise. As we go down the tiers, the numbers get lower and lower. And really having knowledge about a supplier's business continuity program, again, not just having that tick box in place, going deeper into the detail, even carrying out exercises with your critical suppliers is very, very important. It gives you early insight into issues that might be happening. A really good relationship with your tier 1 suppliers as well, your immediate suppliers, can also result in them letting you know of issues further down the supply chain. Another quote in the report, which I wanted to highlight, said, clients are expecting us to have business continuity measures in place, and so they should, but we should be asking our suppliers if they have BC2. We should all be asking, what's it for and how valid is it? Does it cover the service that we're providing, and vice versa? This is what gives us a greater resilience capability. Brian, what's your take on this slide?
Well, I think overall it's interesting. Sharon made a comment. I'm going to start off by reacting to that. And Sharon, I agree with you completely. The disclosures on, fourth party and even beyond in terms of supplier relationships, that's one of the most complex elements. Just like, those technology services and utilities are seldom disclosed in terms of the ingredients that make up a broader technology offering. That's exactly where I see the issues you bring up. It's those seldom, they're seldom disclosed. Interestingly enough, though, if you spend a considerable time researching it, you start finding some of these relationships and you start seeing indirect sources of information that allude to some of those fourth party relationships. And that's kind of why I'm holding out hope that some of the emerging technology, plus hopefully organizations being a little bit more forthcoming as to who they're working with, I'm hoping that the AI-driven solutions help parse through the complexity and find those hidden gems of information that allude to those relationships. And so for me, supply chain resilience is hopefully, fingers crossed that we have technology that can find those hints as to the relationships to increase resilience. But in this area also, and again, I agree with, the world is becoming more and more complex, fragile, threatened. But I also think organizations need to be smart about, how do they decrease complexity in their supply chain? How do they think about the ingredients that go into their products and services, and hopefully source from a sustainability perspective and really understand where they can best get the best inputs that are in areas that are hopefully less risky, less threatened, and hopefully that'll allow increased resilience. Because I think supply chain resilience starts internally. It's not, you don't just put that responsibility on the third party. It starts with product managers and those that own strategy inside their organizations.
Yeah, thank you. That's, yeah, really, really wise words, Brian. I appreciate that. Can see lots of discussion in the chat, so please do keep that going. Chris is providing lots of stats I can see about the Suez Canal. Be interesting to know any more stats about the Panama Canal as well, because I've been hearing a lot about that recently too. The third point we've highlighted is that it's the human side of resilience and just how important that is within organisations to ensure they remain resilient. So I've given a sort of big long list here, and I think you can broadly divide these topics into two. So we've got the problems with the lack of staff, the lack of talent, and that can be for various reasons, but also the problem of human error as well, impacting resilience. Training and exercising, very, very important. But as I say, we'll just go into that in a little while. You know, I've put at the top there, you know, supply chains, you know, the human aspects to supply chains. That was the greatest disruptor in the last year. You can see their disruption due to loss of talent and skills. 46.8% said that was an issue. Human illness as well, 46%. And people actually ranked human, you know, this human element is higher than transport network disruption in terms of the risk. Again, you know, transport network disruption can be as a result of a lack of staff. It should be added as well. Also, the long-term versus the short-term view. So what we're seeing is a lot of organisations thinking quite short-term about mental health and, you know, offering almost patches to increase staff well-being, for example, and what to do in the short term if staff are lost. However, you know, there's a long-term issue with staff as well. We are seeing technologies such as AI come in, and they will be taking the part of some people's jobs. However, that doesn't necessarily mean jobs have to go. What I think we really need to be thinking about the future impact of new technologies such as AI, and really thinking about the staff we need to get the most benefit we can out of those tools and technologies. Embrace them, think about what future skills are needed, and get staff on it now. So as well, we saw a lot of organisations take a really short-term view to this during COVID. So a lot of organisations laid off a lot of staff, and then they found that they had to rehire them as the world got going again. You know, those organisations which did keep staff on were ahead of their competitors, you know, from day one, when they were able to get back into business, and you know, that they were very much ahead. Occupational health incidents as well. That was a top disruptor in our Horizon Scan report this year, top disruptor to organisations. Now that does include mental health. That's at its highest rate it's been for 10 years. It's a primary cause of sick days globally. And I said earlier about those patches that organisations offered during COVID, and a lot of the time they were effective. So webinars, you know, wellbeing days, as people started to come back to the office, you know, things like yoga in the office. I wouldn't have taken part, but some people enjoyed that. But what we're finding now is employees don't really see the value in that as much. And what they really want is to have a feeling of worth in an organisation. They want to feel, you know, be collaborative. They want help with their scheduling. In fact, using AI to help with their scheduling is an example of a use of that. So I think we're going to see, you know, more of that, and organisations taking that in, you know, really taking that a lot more seriously over the next year. The other aspect I mentioned before is the human error. So that's the main cause of failure for cyber incidents. So again, we've talked about deceiving system users. That's always been the primary point of entry. Attackers realise that, and they're really looking to exploit that now as well. And I've also put there a little stat from our emergency and crisis communications report from earlier in the year. Lack of accurate contact information, that's, you know, the number one reason for plans failing. But if you look there at the top 5, there's only one there, unavailability of mobile network, and even that could be human error, actually. You know, they are all as a result of people rather than technology failure. Ryan.
You know, I think of the strategic issues in this topic, Rachel. One of the things that's interesting to me is in talking to those that have responsibility for human resources, as well as the C-suite, you know, they're definitely worried about this because on one hand, they see incredible amounts of some of their best people retiring, those that have the most institutional knowledge. They're having a hard time hiring the right people. They can hire people, but they are having a hard time finding, you know, a large and appropriate quantity of the right people to help further their mission. And at the same time, you know, you talked about, you know, having, you know, employees want to have meaningfulness in their work, and they want to feel like they're connected to something. And I think when we have our remote work now, really pushes that, you know, even though employees like the flexibility of working from home, they feel most connected when they're actually around their colleagues. And the interesting thing is senior leaders want to bring people back because of the perception that they'll increase efficiency, but yet they're worried that they're going to see more and more people leave. This is just I'm bringing this up and I'm throwing a lot out there that seems to be disjointed because it's a complex issue with retirements, hiring, wanting to have people come back. Some people wanting to have a lot of people wanting the flexibility of working from home, but yet want to be connected. This is a really tough issue to address. And, you know, having to solve this will be an entrenched challenge, I think, for many years coming out of the pandemic, because we're working a lot differently now. And so this is a real tough issue that oftentimes gets overlooked, I think, in many organizations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. And actually, Sharon's made a really interesting point. I know everyone can see this chat, but I will read it out. Feeling of worth is particularly relevant when dealing with a cyber event and other severe disruption. I've seen huge numbers of IT people leave after dealing with a cyber event. Many feel undervalued and burnt out after working 24/7 to respond to a cyber attack. Really good point there, Sharon. Thank you for that. Terry.
Yeah, so just further to what Brian was saying, again, a lot of organizations are trying to bring people back into the office, and that's a good thing for the human contact and the face-to-face collaboration. But having just spent a couple of days in the office this week, from an efficiency and effectiveness and getting work done perspective, I don't think I am getting as much work done when I am in the office. But, you know, that's balanced by building those relationships and that networking. But we also have a lot of people who actually don't want to come back to the office, and there's a lot of angst around that. So balancing the needs of having that face-to-face human contact and collaboration with, you know, the fears of people who don't want to do that is really, you know, a tight balancing act. And a lot of staff are also facing burnout. You know, we've seen so much disruption over the last few years. You know, when you consider that, you know, we went through COVID, we went through lockdowns, you know, we've seen now, you know, lots of weather events, you know, fires, floods, etc. We've had to deal with so many situations, you know, and we see overseas now that there's wars happening, and, you know, all of this just adds to that. I guess, you know, things that can impact on our ability to be resilient. So having that support for our employees to help them through all of that is really key as well.
Thank you very much, Terry. Yeah, really, really important words there. Now we look at got a couple of slides devoted to AI because it was something that was flagged an awful lot when we were speaking to people for this project. So we asked respondents, how do you consider the role of AI within your organization? Is it, you know, an enabler, a disabler? Is it a bit of both? You know, apart from the unsure, you can see that bit of both. I think I'd probably fall in that camp. That's how most people see AI at the moment. They really can see the benefits, but they're also a little bit cautious about it. And, you know, a lot of people want a few more controls in place. They want to see it tried and tested before they actually embrace it fully within their organization. 21.5%, you can see there, Yeah, they say bring it on immediately. We're willing to take those risks, work with them, and use AI within our organization. Only 0.8% actually are so worried they see it as actually sort of shoving resilience off the tracks within their organization. But you can see there's an awful lot who are unsure. And I think, again, that points to the sort of current lack of knowledge about the capabilities of AI, what it can do, and also a degree of nervousness as well. There's a lot of content which, mainstream newspapers pump out about, robots taking over the world. We're all going to be out of a job, blah, blah, blah. So, there are some people who are still unsure and just want to see it better used before they take it on. Brian.
You said a quote on the last slide. I wrote it down. It says, the fear of AI taking some people's jobs. I think if you look at some very basic jobs at the present time, that's true. But I also think that in talking to people, there, especially in the business continuity and operational resilience professions, the taking away some jobs might be a good thing in that it's taking away the type of jobs we don't like. The basic, in the weeds analytic efforts, parsing through immense amount of data, looking for something that's really, really hard to find, that's getting in the way of us being able to work with people throughout our businesses, consult with them, play more of a training, role. In other words, AI, to me at least, and to many of the people I talk to, AI offers the hope of freeing us from the mundane to really focus on delivering more of the value added work that I think so many of us are able to do. And that means engaging with leadership, engaging with subject matter experts throughout the business, coach them on building resilience into the go-to-market strategy. So to me, it's like, yeah, it might take away some of our jobs, but it frees us up to do some of the things that really can add value that AI is not meant to do, at least not yet. So I'm actually happy for that potential, risk or threat, but because I just think that so many of us can deliver so much more than having to just deal with all the data all the time. Hopefully, let AI do that. Let AI put together the reports, and let's work with the business only as humans can.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Brian. Again, really wise words. Excuse me. So next slide. So I've tried to put together here some of the the concerns and opportunities for AI. There will be others. These are ones that our members have said. They're ones that I've found through our research as well. But I think what we're seeing here is a huge list of concerns, but also a huge list of opportunities as well. So, I'll go through the concerns first. We like to end on a bright note, but, people are worried about adding another risk to an already very crowded risk environment. Also generative AI and the potential risk of it to leak customer information or source code to outside the organization. There's an awful lot of organizations that are already doing this, and they're already using internal information, and they're allowing AI to data mine that to really improve knowledge management in the organization. It's becoming very, very effective, but again, there is the risk of that if somebody can penetrate the organization, getting hold of that information. The ability of AI to generate cyber attacks, talked about that earlier. Ability to spread fake news, targeted disinformation, potential manipulation of financial markets as well. Fake news, we're seeing newscasters now, deep fakes being presented of newscasters, which is being used to fake, to spread fake news. The current lack of governance structure, I do think we will see more governance coming in, but that there is currently some lack of governance. Some countries have gone really over the top in terms of governance and actually banned the technology completely. Excuse me. Italy was one of the places that did that. Again, we've talked about this already, AI removing the need for some positions in organizations, as Brian said, not necessarily a bad thing, can lead to job creation as well, because we'll be able to exploit what AI can do to an even greater depth. Lack of time, that's always a sort of omnipresent problem. And also, people are worried about being left out. They don't want to embrace it for now, but they also fear that if they don't jump on the AI bandwagon, they're going to be left behind. But huge list of opportunities as well. So supporting collaborative working practices. We've all talked about that need to, be collaborative, feel your worth within an organization. Improving an organization's risk management process as well. I think that's an important one. We're going to talk a bit later about actually in the BIA process itself. Enabling data mining of internal and external information sources, more effective staff scheduling, supply chain, so that getting that early warning of supply chain disruptions and risk mitigation. There are some really exciting supply chain tools out there that use AI. Have a Google, you'll go down all kinds of rabbit holes, but it's really, really exciting topic. Detection of fraud and financial crime in financial services organizations. Also using AI to plot and generate scenarios for business continuity exercises within organizations. Again, you can do that often for free. Not saying they're going to be that effective, but you can see AI really helping in that aspect in the future. Terry.
Thanks, Rachel. So definitely looking at that detection of fraud and financial crimes is something that's come to the fore in Australia. We've now got a new Scam Watch being introduced by the Australian Banking Association and customer-owned banking associations, so that we will see collaboration between financial services in Australia to be able to confirm payee details when you're transferring money in real time from your banks. And they're also looking at major expansions of intelligence sharing across the sector. So again, so that we can act on scams and threat intelligence in a more consolidated way. So I think making sure that that critical information is shared across the sector at speed can help to reduce the impact of scams on people. And again, AI can have a really major impact on allowing us to do that. So it's certainly something that's exciting, and also allowing us to help protect our members and their money into the future.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. I think that's a really good example of it in your particular sector. Now moving into a section, how have attitudes towards BC practices changed this last year? So looking particularly at the great BIA. So we asked if organisations were happy with their current BIA process. You can see here, there's quite a mixed picture. Moderately happy, very happy, that is the bulk of responses. But you can also see that there's quite a few people who really don't feel very happy at all. So, just under a quarter say they're moderately unhappy or very unhappy. And there are specific concerns highlighted with the tools and software used to conduct BIAs. Another issue as well was siloing during the BIA process. So, not having a centralized procedure can result in BIAs being very inefficient and also very different. There's no sort of cohesion between the different departments. For a BIA, don't think you need me to tell you this, to be successful, it really needs to be aligned to the needs of the business, not a one size fits all. Also regularly updated and, using technology. Oh, look, there's another. I've got a slide for that. Can really help with that as well. So this is a question about using technology to help with the BIA. So over a third, you can see they use specialist software to manage the BIA process. I think it's a concern that a fifth there in that red pie of the chart don't use software to manage the BIA process. And that does, that's not using Excel, for example, that's that black pie above. but actually not using software at all. So using pen and paper, putting everything in folders, you know, that's siloing by definition if it's put away in a folder. They can't be updated quickly, not readily shareable. You know, I think if you're still doing the pen and paper approach, it's worth looking at the other options around there. There are some people who've gone completely the other way and are fully embracing it. And I'm just going to read one of the responses that an interviewee said in theirs. And we've done our initial BIAs and developed a nomological, I never had to say that in a presentation before, map. We've identified all the assets and the relationships between the assets, whether that is service, products or stakeholders. Using logarithmic mathematical modeling, we know how quickly we can feel pain between our assets, and we know now what our recovery time objective should be, or our recovery point objective. Using that information, we can create a digital twin. Now, we're not all going to have somebody, you know, with that level of IT skills within their organization. So, you know, it's for those people who can't, it really is worth looking at specialist software that can help with that. Some people are developing it in-house, but that's also got problems attached to it as well. Again, some people are going down, you know, much more simplification route. So in order to get senior management engaged, they're looking at the BIA process and seeing how they can simplify that in order to get greater awareness around the organization. Brian, I suspect you've got something to say about software.
Yeah, well, I'm just not necessarily, I can talk about software all day long, but I'm going to actually make a broader comment first. And that is, you know, I personally, you know, there, unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe the BIA process is one that always results in debate amongst business continuity and resilience practitioners, in that we oftentimes, you know, we make certain assumptions regarding what's the most important outcomes. To some, it's, you know, it's identifying RTOs and RPOs. Some it's estimating or trying to quantify the impact if certain parts of the organization were down. To me, it's all about what I think it's aligns to the quote that you read, Rachel, which was being able to really identify the relationships, the up and downstream dependencies in the organization, and having, I always call it a digital model of the organization. And what I found is that when the BIA is done well, and you're able to build that digital model of the organization, it's now an incredible asset for a wide range of different initiatives in an organization. But in particular, when you experience some form of a disruption, to be able to mine that information and you know, say, I take away something from the organization, what are the downstream implications? You know, BIAs take a lot of work. They take a lot of work to do. They take a lot of work to maintain. But if you focus one of the key outcomes on that digital model of the organization and the relationships, to me, it gives you a much more nimble response when faced with a disruption. So I'm a big fan of it personally. And without sounding biased, I can't, you know, for large organizations, complex organizations, I don't know how you do it without software to manage those relationships and mine that information, especially when faced with a disruption. So, you know, it's, again, BIA, super important, especially if you focus on the digital model of the organization. Sure, RTOs and RPOs are important, but those relationships are so important to know and maintain.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Again, we got a question about this. We'll come to that at the end. But Sharon said, as a consultant, I had to do a strategic summary report that consolidated the BIA results. This doesn't appear to be carried out generally in the workplace. And she's also said the BIA has been debated for the 25 years plus I've been in BC. Yeah, I can fully understand that. And, you know, if we don't debate it, it's never going to change. And then Chris has said, I use a risk assessment after the BIA to provide a page, maybe two, to the C-suite that summarizes their risk exposure and how bad their situation is. They seem to like it, and they used it in exercises and incidents to focus on their greatest vulnerabilities first, depending on what the threat or hazard is. So thank you to both of you for those comments. Now we look at AI. We talked a lot about the risks of that, but are people actually open to the idea of using it? And I was quite surprised here. People are prepared. You can see there 15% actually say, bring it on. They want to fully embrace it. The more automated, the better. The majority are taking that sort of second approach. Yes, they'd love to use it in some way, but they still need some kind of human intervention. That's definitely the camp I'd be in. Only 10% said that they wouldn't use it at all. And again, 16%, still got concerns, that unsure category, not quite sure how they take it at the moment. Brian, I think you were somewhat surprised by these figures as well.
Well, I think it's new. It's a form of change, right? I mean, when change is introduced to us, we usually are, human nature is we're skeptical. Goes back to what I said before. If BIA is something that we're not fully happy with, and many of the times, many of the reasons for not being happy is it's complex, hard work. It's a lot of detailed work. We have to engage the business, and they have other things to do. If AI can help, if we can feed, I'll call it feed the robot, so to speak, if we can feed that with source information and help it do some of the foundational work to build and understand relationships, understand potential impacts, suggest recovery objectives, and then allow us and our business counterparts to QA the results, fill in the blanks. To me, that's an incredible, to me, that would be a meaningful improvement, to my work when working the BIA. But again, that's a change. It's not saying that the AI would do the BIA, but if AI and generative forms of AI can help us assess complex data and do some of the data modeling, I think that's a welcome change, especially when we get into complex relationships and the like, similar to what we talked about with supply chain and cyber related information we need to know. So that's my take on it. I think we're just about there to be able to start doing this. I know for my organization, we've already released AI as it relates to generating plan content and the format of business continuity plans, and we're actively doing the work for the BIA right now, and the results are just stunning. So I'm really excited about this, but got to manage it, and we got to manage the risks, the privacy, the confidentiality issues. And until you do that, people should be scared about this and worried about this.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Brian. Final slide in this section. It's about third-party risk. This is a key concern for people at the moment, and really managing their suppliers. So talked about this quite a lot in general, but it's that due diligence point. Third-party suppliers, it's time consuming, and many people say that they don't have time to do that necessary due diligence. It's very, very worth the time. It's worth getting potential suppliers looked at before you sign a contract. Really delve into the detail of their resilience programs. What suppliers do they have? I know Sharon said earlier, it's very, very hard to do, but it's something which is increasingly being expected as well. So a lot of organizations will have that detail available. If a contract depends on it, it's advisable for them to have that available. Also as well, operational resilience regulations, helping to drive that awareness of third-party risk. And I know, Terry, you had a point to make about that.
Yes, definitely. So I guess from the Australian regulatory environments, CPS 234 put cyber resilience front and centre of our thoughts, and very much focusing on third-party cyber risk, cyber risk and third-party cyber risk. As CPS 230 will force us to look even deeper into our material service providers and those that support our critical business operations, and making sure that those suppliers that we rely upon do have the effective controls and manage their operational risks effectively. Again, they are just an extension of our business, so we need to treat them like they are part of our business. So making sure that they are doing the right thing. And I think the governance and oversight over that AI could definitely play a part in how we manage that. I think, you know, having the ability to, you know, get results of, you know, your controls assurance, et cetera, and bring it in-house, and then have AI do some mapping and across that to you know, bring out where the risks are. That would be a use case that I think could be highly effective to help us manage the huge amount of the supplies that we do have. And I guess there's also, you know, considering what are there concentration risks that we're exposed to and threats around that? So, you know, we need to understand, you know, if everyone in our sector is using the same couple of suppliers, what does that mean if that supplier goes away? Where are we on that food chain of recovery and resilience? So, yeah, there's a lot of, I think, focus on managing our key third-party suppliers is really, really important. And I think that the regulations, you know, from the finance sector at least, and APA regulated entities will help to drive that. But every business should be considering that, because ultimately, you know, that could see your business being undone.
Thank you, Terry. But we are getting there. I'm going to getting towards the last section now. I want to have a few minutes for questions at the end. So, you know, we now look at spending priorities for the next year, and where in that resilience, you know, sphere is concentration, is spending going to be concentrated. Less spend doesn't necessarily mean less focus, and we'll get to that in just a second. So the first slide is, you know, how will the budget for next year for both BC and resilience, so overall, how will that change in 2024? Again, really positive results here considering the global financial situation. You know, that's knocking on 95%, so it'll either be the same or it will increase over the whole year. Terry, I don't know if you want to come on and say a couple of words about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess it would be really brave to cut the budget when we look at the threats that are facing our organisations. You know, we've got increasing cyber threats, we've got natural threats, there's climate change, there's so many different things out there. So to be cutting the budget at this point in time, I think you would face a lot of questions if something happened and you hadn't managed that risk appropriately. So I guess we need to make sure that we have the right resources and budget available to manage those threats that continue to occur and evolve over time.
Yeah. Brian.
You know, Rachel, when I saw this slide and these results for the first time, in many ways it's similar to what we see in years past. Of course, there's a lot of inflationary pressure around the world, and so that's naturally, you know, as wages increase, and to Terry's point, it would be brave to cut costs or cut investment in the threat environment that we operate. But I think it's also incumbent upon all of us to demonstrate value in every day, so that the business realizes and gets value from the results of that investment. Now, it's not always you're not always able to quantify the return on investment, but I think, you know, I'm always saddened because when we have situations where there's economic trouble in certain parts of the world or even globally, we see a lot of turnover in terms of employment in our industry. And that bothers me because I want to make, you know, we're so important to make sure we're bringing attention to this very important issue of resilience. And we've got to demonstrate value. We've got to highlight the issues, the vulnerabilities. We've got to highlight opportunities to increase resilience, coach our organizations to get to a better place, to justify the increased spend. And so these results are, you know, similar to what I think we see quite a bit, but I think we need to be even more focused on, you know, are we demonstrating a higher level of ROI vis-a-vis this investment?
Thank you, Brian. So just a quick shoot through these. So look at business continuity, just business continuity, a bit of a drop there, not quite as high, mostly staying the same. And I think that's because, you know, a lot of organizations have invested already in business continuity, got mature programs, so it's not going to be a real spending priority for the next year. Operational resilience, you can see there, is a bit higher. You know, that sort of tells the story of the slides you've already seen. Cyber resilience as well, that's higher, and I think that really aligns with what we're seeing in terms of that being a big strategic priority over the next year. And then looking at AI, particularly, this was sort of extra slide I put in. So again, organizations are keen to spend more money on that, but again, there's that big unsure bracket of people who are a bit concerned still at the moment to know how much their organization is going to invest. Final slide, a few predictions for next year. And I think this, for me, this section really highlights the importance of actually reading the whole report. There's so much in there, we couldn't put everything in the presentation. So when we actually spoke to people and talked about their sort of general priorities for next year, these were the ones that came out, but a lot more information in the report. So increasing levels of cyber resilience, don't really need to talk about that. We've done that already. Continuing to learn from that legacy of COVID-19 and actually other incidents that we encounter, that continual improvement aspect. Don't settle for what is good now. Really look at best practices, speak to your peers, see what they're doing. Loss of power. This was a theme, particularly in Africa, in Southern Africa. Load shedding there is a big issue for organizations, having to switch power off to a timetable for homes, for businesses. It's meant to follow a timetable. It usually doesn't. So people have no idea when their power is going to go off. Makes it very, very difficult to do business there. Addressing short and long-term risk, climate risk as well. So again, I think I don't need to tell my Southern Hemisphere counterparts just how climate risk is having an impact. We're getting, I know in Australia, for example, you're getting bushfires, flooding, all happening at the same time, increasing year on year. Seasons are becoming longer. We're sort of almost in a sort of 2 seasons a year now, and extreme heat at times of the year when it wouldn't necessarily have been felt before. We're also seeing insect-borne diseases, which typically used to be in the tropics. They're now moving north and they're moving south. We're seeing, will we see diseases like malaria, for example, coming into parts of Europe that, haven't experienced that before? The same, things like dengue fever, going southwards, all things that we need to think about. And finally, as well, addressing and meeting the requirements of new regulations. So I'm going to shoot straight into the questions here, because I know we've had, well, there's been an awful lot of chat. So thank you to those of you who've been very, very active in that chat box. Hopefully everyone's able to read all those comments, because we don't have time to go through all those. I'm going to go back to a question that Karthik asked earlier. And they've said BIA and risk management is considered as the same. Is this a common problem? Asking what the practical solution to this is, and what kind of companies don't conduct a BIA in the stats showed on the screen. I mean, for that last point, some smaller organizations don't, very, probably one-man band type organizations. They may well not. It is worth doing for very small organizations as well. Some organizations have gone very, they've gone away from the BIA for whatever reason and come up with alternative solutions. Brian, do you have any comments you can make to Karthik there?
Well, I think I guess I wouldn't necessarily think of the BIA and risk management as synonymous. When I think of the BIA, I think, as I said before, I think it's a tool in the continuity and resilience profession's arsenal to help understand, build some self-awareness regarding the organization, how it operates, how it goes to market, the relationships. It's also about the requirements that you need to develop strategies to ensure continuity and resilience. It's, and when paired with a risk assessment process, it helps identify vulnerabilities, perhaps single points of failure, areas where you may lack alternates and substitutions. Sometimes I think of risk management in a much more broader context, in that looking at all the organization's myriad of potential issues that might either get in the way of it successfully meeting its objectives, or also identifying opportunities to be able to be even more successful. So that's kind of how I see the two. Organizations that choose not to do a business impact analysis, again, I think, there might be other processes they use to, understand relationships, that digital model, the organization, perhaps. Maybe they have other processes that they use to establish business continuity requirements. But, again, whether you call it a BIA or you're doing something a little differently, you still need requirements. You still need to know how you go to market to be able to protect the organization and ensure it's recoverable. So whether you call yourself, whether you say you're doing a BIA or not, odds are you're doing something formal or informal that deliver the same results, at least hopefully.
Yeah. Terry, do you have any comments to add to that particular question?
Yeah, no, I would see those as two distinct functions, but totally interconnected and interrelated. So again, yeah, your risk management processes are there to identify those things that that, as Brian said, will impact on your objectives, your strategic objectives. So I think that the BIA is there to identify, okay, what is our business processes, or what are our products and services? What are the resources that we have to support that, and what would happen if any of those were impacted? So I do see them as two distinct things, but definitely, the risks and the controls are interrelated to, interconnected to what we do to manage the resources that support our business operations.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. We've had a question come in from Dom here. I don't know if any of the panelists have got any thoughts about this, but Dom's asked, any thoughts on business continuity with sustainability of not-for-profit funding from the government, and if it stops? Brian, have you got any comments on that one? Turn the camera on.
Yeah, sorry, just went the other direction there. No, I don't know if I have too much experience in that area. I mean, if I understand the question correctly, I mean, I do think that in general, concepts around sustainability and resilience are very much intertwined, especially as it relates to sustainability of resources and all of the other inputs into an organization's go-to-market strategy. Less so, I don't have a whole lot of exposure to more of the government funding to ensure that. However, I would imagine there are many industries and many sectors where there are incentives to do so. That's just not an area that I've had a whole lot of exposure to.
Yeah. I work for a not-for-profit, the BCI in the UK, and we don't get any funding. I know that. I wish we did, but we don't. Terry, you got any final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, again, probably not my area of expertise, but I guess, looking at, are there other sources that you can, are there grants? Are there anything else that you could potentially look at that might help you with that funding, or working with, collaborating with other not-for-profits that might help, pulling together a group that can work collaboratively, in that space, that, to help identify what you need to do. That would be my only thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. And we're just about up to time, so I'm going to ask you both, what's the one top of mind resilience thought going into 2024? Well, I'll let you think. I'm going to go to Brian first. He's always quick on the mark.
Thank you. No, I mean, we talked about so many things that I probably have more of a top 5 list, but if I had to pick one,
Yeah.
I'm most excited about the promise of AI governed properly to be able to take some of the work away that we typically don't like to do, and that can really do better than what we've been doing manually today. So that's I did my keynote at BCI World in London last month. that was one of my key takeaways. I expect 12 months from right now that, you know, as much as we've been focused on ChatGPT, Bard, and other generative AI platforms, we're only scratching the surface. And I'm really excited about the potential. And I'm, you know, of course, nervous about those that fail to govern it properly.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Very good on the spot answer. And Terry.
Yeah, so I think that they're great points, Brian. I think from my perspective, I guess just continuing to look at what we need to do to meet our ongoing regulatory requirements, and continue to be able to continue to provide our services to our members. You know, they're ultimately, you know, or members or your customers, however you call it, like ultimately that's what we're here to do. So, you know, looking at it from that member lens of what can we do so that we can keep the lights on and keep providing our services.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you, Terry, for that answer, and Brian. So that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank both of you, Brian and Terry, for your time and your really considered insights that you've shared this morning. I know I've learned a lot from both of you, so I really appreciate the time you've spent here today, and I'm sure those who are listening as well probably had the same thoughts as I have. Also, a big thank you to everyone who filled the survey out for this and also participated in the interviews. You know, our reports are only as good as our members share the information. So please do keep filling the surveys in. Please offer yourself up for interviews with the research team, entirely confidential. And I encourage you to do that. It really does help with the research that we do. Last but by no means least, a massive thank you to Risk Connect for their continued sponsorship. Very much appreciate that. As I said, our research is completely impartial, but we do rely on the support of sponsors such as Risk Connect to enable us to keep our research programme going. So Risk Connect have been really good this year, a sort of really good partner in terms of the research that we've been producing. So very grateful. Thank you to Risk Connect. Thank you again for providing Brian to share some of those insights. And thank you lastly to Terry again. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy what is left of your day. And I look forward to speaking to you at the next launch event. Enjoy the holiday season. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.